Hello! Welcome along to this week's episode of the Let's Get Running podcast. How is the Caramel Kid?
I'm good. I'm ready for this Frankfurt journey.
Lovely. And if obviously people, this is an audio feature, you can't see the visuals. We are filming, Jermaine is on a bus. He's actually on a bus. So we can't put this out visually, but I can see Jermaine in his bus uniform. It's looking good. Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm not in the cab driving. It's a broken down bus.
Perfect. This is a bit of a special podcast. So as we mentioned last week, we're weekly now. Let's Get Running podcast. This week is all about my journey. So if you didn't know, I'm 35 now. I am due to have my first baby in December. So I've really got one more shot at running the marathon I think that I'd like to run, which is 2:20. Got one more shot to do it. So I'm going to do my very best to train for that and do it in Frankfurt this year. And we thought might be quite interesting to try and look at what I've been doing up to now, and then look at and use the advice of experts in the field of running to try and help me reach that 2:20 goal. So we've got loads of people involved. There's our previous interviewees, Renee McGregor. She's going to be helping out with my nutrition and my diet. We have Andy Lane, who's going to help us out a bit with my psychology. He's going to be slaying my mental demons. We've got Samuel Marcura, who, if you haven't heard of Samuel Marcura, he is a sports physiologist. He is based in the University of Kent. And if you've recently read Alex Hutchinson's brilliant book on endurance, he features quite heavily in there. So he's going to be really interesting. We'll do some testing with him. I can't remember who else is involved. There's a lot of people. Morton, the drinks company, hopefully will be providing some drinks. They are the brand used by Farah and Kipchoge and all those kind of guys. And on this week's show, obviously it's the start of I've got about 17, 18 weeks to go. We've got Nate Jenkins, who is a 2:14 marathon runner based over in the US. And he is I wouldn't say he's a disciple of Canova, but if you don't know who Canova is an Italian coach who went over to Kenya maybe 10, 15 years ago and has revolutionised performance in Kenyan running. And he's a very distinct kind of way of training his athletes, and we're going to be trying to do...
But not only kip rock. Yeah?
Oh yeah. He wasn't. That was another Italian coach. Yeah, it wasn't the the Kip Rock coach, but he was Rosa, wasn't he, Kip Rock? But anyway, good.
And more importantly, Molly Dixon.
Yeah,
she's going to be helping you.
She's
going to be fueling your body. Because I'm guessing she does this.
You're right. She's the cook. She's the cook in the house, so she's going to be sorting me out too. So we're going to have expert chef Molly Wilmot, who's going to be on Molly Dixon rather, but helping me out. So it's going to be fun, and it'd be good to have everybody along on the journey. Like, we're going to try and take photos of the training. I'm going to publish exactly the kind of sessions that I'm doing, and I'm going to be giving like Instagram updates, and obviously every fortnight.
The weekly times. So you give a weekly plan of everything. So people can maybe copy it.
They can join in. They can do this exactly the same training as me if they would like to.
They can post up. They've done it.
They can post up. Yeah, we're going to call it 220 hashtag 220 or bust on Instagram, or hashtag Let's Get Running. Will you be able to view anyone that's joining in with the same training and trying to get to a spring marathon run in good shape. Obviously, great if you guys want to do Frankfurt Marathon. The same. There's also loads of marathons around the same time. I think there's a couple in Bournemouth and lots of others based in the UK. So if you want to join in with the training, by all means, join me on the training journey and sharing it with all the social things you can get these days, and we'll do it together.
So first off, we need to find out what you're doing now. So you did a race this weekend, right?
Yeah, so I raced in Appingedam. So people probably won't have heard of Appingedam. People in Holland haven't heard of Appingedam. It's a tiny little town in the north near Groningen, which you might have heard of. And for some reason, there's this guy there who's just created this amazing race. And it's a 10k race. It's not particularly fast because it's 2 laps round this little town. It's quite a lot of twists and turns. But he manages to get some of the best runners in the world to turn up. Like Wilson Kipsang was there a couple of years ago, and they've had, I can't remember, so Jeffrey Mutai is the course record holder. And this year it was Daniel Wanjiru's turn to give it a crack. But it was really hot. We had the same weather in Holland as he did in England recently, so it was really hot and it was really windy. So you always had the wind in your face. So I ran what sounds like a slow time of 31:42, but considering Daniel Wanjiru, who is one of the greatest marathon runners in the world, only ran 29:30, I'm not too disheartened by that. So I was only 2 minutes behind him. I'd imagine he's usually a 27-minute runner. So I think if it was on a flat course in good conditions, I reckon I'm probably in about 30:40 shape. So I reckon I could probably lose a minute.
And your PB for 10k, PB for 10k is?
PB for 10k at the moment is 30:15, but that was track, so 30:22 on the road. So I'm not in too bad shape. I thought I was in worse shape, but really, in reality, I've only run 31:40. So we'll see. I did beat a few guys. I beat a guy who ran 2:15 recently last year in Amsterdam. So it was a good run from me, but it wasn't like, I'm not in blazing form or anything like that. So got a long way to go.
And what is your weekly mileage?
Do you know what? I don't actually know. So I could tell you what I kind of do. I do.
You better start writing it down, because how are you going to publish this stuff if you don't know what you're doing?
Well, I'm going to be on Strava. So I know everything that's on there. Sean Dixon on Strava, you can follow me, or I'm part of the Let's Get Running Strava group, so if you can go on there as well, that'd be cool if you want to join in with that. I think I'm doing my basic schedule is 40 minutes easy, sometimes with the wife on a Monday morning, and then 60, 70 in the evening. Similar again on a Tuesday, with perhaps the evening one being a bit slightly more positive, or I'll do like a fartlek session. And then Wednesday, a longer run about an hour and 10, hour and 20. Thursday, I go down the track with the guys in Holland, but I do a 40-minute run in the morning. Friday's a 50-minute run. Saturday's a long run of about an hour and 40. Sundays between an hour and 10, hour and 15. And that's it. So I'm not doing much speed work. I'm doing just a lot of running at the moment. But yeah, it's going to be fun. We're going to, on the end of our chat, we're going to put an interview with Nate and what he's going to be doing and how his advice for my training. So you can listen along to that, find out what his theories are on running and how he's going to be helping me with my plan. And interestingly, at the same time, there's a guy called Greg from Cloud 259, I think it is, the podcast. And I asked Nate to give us a hand about a week ago, and the day after, Nate said he hadn't been contacted for 3 years for a podcast. The day after, Greg got in touch and said, can you give us a hand too? So Greg's doing exactly the same thing. He's going for sub 3. So if you want to get in touch with Greg, have a listen to their podcast, Cloud 259. If I've got it wrong, I'll put a note on the show notes. But yeah, so there's two of us going for the same thing, so it should be quite interesting to see how it affects our training.
Are you doing any other extras, like you're doing weights, plyometrics? So are you just doing just running?
That's the interesting thing. He's going to give me this plan by which you can, again, everyone can follow. I will publish it. It's Dan Pfaff, the guy who was Greg Rutherford's trainer for a while, and another guy who made a circuit training thing. It's only 10 minutes a day, right? And he said he did it when he was on N214, and it just made you super strong. Now, you'll hear this in the interview, but I'm going to be doing that. So again, I'll publish that, and people can join in with that. 10 minutes a day. Let's see how we get on. I might even tweet or Instagram it every day to show you that I'm doing it. And if you can do the same, that'd be really cool.
Well, that'd be Snapchat. You have to Snapchat it. That's the new...
I don't know how to use Snapchat. I might do a story. I've been trying to get into them stories lately. I'm still behind on that. I'm 35, man. I can't be keeping up with all this stuff.
You ain't even halfway. Come on now.
I'm not even halfway. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. That's what we're going to be doing. So it's going to be fun. And in a second we'll get on with the interview with Nate. But yeah, keep in touch. Check me out on Facebook, Let's Get Running, Instagram, Let's Get Running, Twitter, Let's Get Running. And you can learn more about the story and hopefully join in with either those circuits or with some other bits of the training. But we're going to talk to Nate in a minute. Before we do that, we're not going to have an outro on this show. So before we do that, we wanted to ask people, like, obviously leading up to the marathon, I'm going to have to be prepared for. I'm running through the summer. I'm going to have to be prepared for chafing. Chafing happens to us all, Jermaine. And what we want you to do this week, if it's possible, for next week, is to send us either on email if it's too saucy, or or on Facebook or any medium that we've got. Twitter's quite a good one. Send us your stories about chafing, your worst stories. Have you got a little story for us, Jermaine? Can you shed some light on your chafing problems?
I remember I done the London schools.
Yeah.
And it was cold.
Yeah.
So I'm running, and when I finished, my friend said, like, what's that hanging out your shorts? And, like, basically, one of my balls was, like, the size of a cricket ball. And it's been, like, rubbing so much. I was like, bloody hell. I couldn't believe it. But because it was cold, everything was numb.
Oh, God.
So, see, once I started to warm up, it's like, you know, like skin on skin, is that really, it's like, it's really sore.
I've had nothing like that. I've had a bit of I remember running in Sicily when it was really hot, training for the marathon in October, and I certainly got red marks all over my gym, which was not very nice, but yeah. I've never had my gym.
I didn't know you named your Willie.
It's not as bad as having a cricket ball size ball bag, but yeah.
Well, yeah, true.
Yeah. So that's our story. We want to hear more from you. It can be whatever you like. It could be, I won't try and second guess, but yeah, send us those in. You can do it privately via email or get it on Twitter and tell us your worst chase stories.
We won't name and shame, so you can put unknown sender.
Unknown sender. And if you do want to be public with them, what can we call the hashtag to put it under, Jermaine?
We have hashtag chafing or something like that.
Hashtag chafe nightmare. Or hashtag chubby chafing. That's what we'll do. Hashtag chubby chafing. Yeah, put it out there, and we'll share those on the next couple of shows. But thanks a lot, guys. And here we go with the interview with Nate. And the need for carbohydrate during races. Are you still quite anti-gels and that sort of thing?
I wouldn't say I'm anti. I have no problem taking them. I just think that we give them far more credit,
right? Yeah.
than they deserve. I teach math. I'm a math guy. When you look at sort of the deficit, if you have the idea that if you've run a marathon and you've hit the wall in the normal range between 20 and 22 miles,
yeah,
and you're a normal weight male,
yeah,
you're burning about 120 to 140 calories per mile.
Yeah.
And so usually you have about 2,000 calories worth of glycogen stored in your running specific muscles.
Yeah.
So if you run out of glycogen at 20 miles, that means you're burning out of your 120 calories a mile, 100 of those are carbohydrate.
Right.
So you've been left with a 6-mile deficit.
Yeah.
So you need to come up with 600 carbohydrate calories to get those 6 miles.
Yeah.
If you try to do that through fueling, there are two things. One, 600 calories is not insubstantial.
Yeah.
Two, not all of the calories you ingest will be digested. And if they are digested, or when the ones that are digested, it has to go through the brain first. The brain gets supremacy on new sugars in the body.
Right.
And then, even not going through the brain, some of them are going to get dumped into other muscles. So if you're getting even 80% of the calories you take in, that still now bumps your number up to needing about 800 calories ingested. Right. And that's conservative.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And that's a lot without upsetting your stomach.
Yeah.
And so most people who continue to train in the same way that they have that has not produced the results that they desire can find 2 miles or whatever with fueling. So in the U.S. a few years ago, there was a guy, why can't I remember his name right now? But in his debut marathon, he ran 2:10:26 at Houston.
Oh, yeah, I think I know. Yeah.
But he was coached by Greg McMillan.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name for the life of me right now. But let's assume, and this isn't true, but if he had done that and he hadn't taken any gels, he was on 2:09 low pace to 24 miles.
Right.
And he came apart.
Yeah.
And he ran his last 2 miles in like 6 minutes and change.
Yeah.
Still runs a 2:10.
Yeah.
If that guy comes to me and says, I ran out of glycogen at 24 miles, I say, eat some goo.
Yeah.
Drink some Gatorade, like you can find 2 miles, no problem.
Yeah.
But finding 4 to 6 gets a little tougher.
Okay.
So I think that you're more likely to have a lot more success by training your body to take that ratio where you were burning, say, 100 calories a mile of glycogen and, whatever the remaining, let's call it 30 calories from fat.
Yeah.
If you can change that ratio to 80-50,
yeah,
that gets you 400 calories more in your system in those specific muscles.
Right.
When you get to 20 miles.
Okay.
And that reduces your need over the final miles from 600 calories to 480 calories. So with a very small shift in your body's natural ability, you're there. And the big way it works is ultra marathoners can go out and run for 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 miles.
Yeah.
And they're taking in some fuel, but they're not taking in nearly what they're burning.
No.
But they don't have glycogen wall problems. Why? Well, they're running a little bit slower, so they're burning more fat.
Right, okay. So it's switching on that fat adaptive, the fat burning aspect that it gets.
Yeah, essentially, you're just convincing your body that the marathon is easy enough that it can burn more fat. It's just like when you walk a mile, you burn about the same amount of calories as you would for running that same mile. Obviously, it takes longer,
Yeah.
But for the distance, you're still burning that same 120 to 150 calories.
Okay.
But 85-90% of the calories you burn will be from fat.
Okay.
And then as you go faster and faster, if you get to the point where if you were somehow able to blindly sprint for a mile, 100% of what you burn would be in carbohydrate.
Right.
And lactic acid. But, that's essentially carbohydrate as far as the calories are concerned.
Yeah. And so it comes into trying to become really, really efficient, I guess, at that marathon effort.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at running in general, if you look at the times run in the 1990s, which were heavily influenced by EPO, but if you look at those times and you look at the track times, we're actually running about the same times today on a world-class level in terms of the, who's going to be ranked number 1 in the world, number, 2 in the world. There's not quite the same depth on the track, which is partially EPO tests and partially less money to be made on the track. But if you look at the marathon, particularly, not just the fact that, you would win Chicago or London or Berlin in 2:08.
Yeah.
But also, even more shockingly, if you look at what the 100th fastest time or the 400th fastest time is, the marathon is completely reinvented.
Right. Yeah.
Now, some of that is that some of the money left track and field, and marathon money has gone up slightly, if not noticeably.
Yeah.
But that's not enough to explain why a 2:08 would have been the number 1 time in the world in 1995.
Yeah.
And would now be like the 200th time in the world.
Yeah.
And the big thing that has changed is that a handful of Italian coaches spent a lot of time in Africa and really convinced, particularly the Kenyans, to change how they were preparing for the marathon.
Right.
And that marathon prep, which is what Jalindo Bourdin was doing in the 80s and, a number of other athletes had been early adopters of, but that type of training is what enabled a lot of these guys. They're not any better at 10,000 meters than their successors were 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
But a 27-30 guy, instead of running 2:10 on the high end for most of them and 2:14 on the low end, is now running 2:05, 2:06 on the low end.
Yeah.
And, 2:10, 2:11 on the high end.
Okay.
And it's just a different means of training.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that they're not doping.
No.
That's possible. But if you argue that they're all doping, well, then they were all doping 20 years ago too.
Absolutely.
So all those things are relatively, again, EPO has become a little less available, but if anything, that should make today's time slower, not today's times faster.
Yeah.
And I'm not in the kind of circles that I would know if something truly new has come up. That is possible, that there's some drug that for whatever reason is highly effective in half marathon and marathon running.
Yeah.
But has little to no impact in 5K, 10K running.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But this is a trend that's going on 15 years, and it correlates very well with the change in how Kenyans prepared for the marathon.
Yeah.
And then my own personal experiences, it works. You prepare more specifically, and you do really, really well.
Yeah.
And I think, you're coming from the British background, I'm coming from the American background, but in both cases, there was some really great British and American marathoners in the late 70s in through the 1980s.
Yeah.
But most of those guys, even though their training would be very, very similar to what the elite and sub-elite guys of our respective countries are still doing today, they raced long a lot more.
Right.
And so a lot of them ran a lot of marathons, and their body learned that process. So prior to Alberto Salazar in the United States, the fastest American debut marathoner, the fastest first marathon for a guy, was Greg Meyer, ran 2:13:56.
Right.
And so essentially you have a generation where America produced almost 175, I think it was like 160 something, sub 212 marathoners from 1975 to 1985.
Yeah.
And only one of them debuted faster than 2:13:56. Only two of them debuted under 2:14.
Right. Okay.
And I think Great Britain had a few guys who did have some pretty precocious debuts. But with the exception of probably Charlie Spedding, almost all of those guys had a long history of doing a lot of long races. Yeah. So 30K on the roads. Even the old national cross country was a 10-mile race, and a lot of guys just did a lot of those off of high volume. Yeah. And I think a lot of that turned into unplanned marathon-specific work.
Right. Okay. And what got you into kind of doing the method? Did you? Obviously, you were training beforehand. What made you kind of go and try and sort of follow these Italian?
Yeah, I came out of college and I wasn't very good, but I am a natural long driver, so I've only got 58-second flat out quarter speed. Yeah. And so I always did better the longer the race, and I had a year of. I was out of athletic eligibility, and I was getting a master's degree, which is like. You get your bachelor's first 4 years and then a master's after that. I had eligibility for college to continue competing in that first year of graduate school. But then I had another year of graduate school where I wasn't working and I didn't have any eligibility left to compete. So I was sort of training myself. And the thought in the back of my head was I wanted to try to qualify for the U.S. Olympic trials in the marathon. And at that time, that took a 2:22, what was called the B standard, or a 2:20. For an A standard, the difference being A standard, they paid for your flight and hotel. B standard, you got to pay your own way. Okay. So I was sort of just coming out of school and just trying to train better. And I was very obsessed with Arthur Lydiard. And so I spent about a year doing a ton of miles and following Lydiard, sort of. I kept having like a crisis of confidence and not really doing I would get hurt or something, usually during the hill phase. So he has a base phase, a hill phase, an anaerobic phase, and a competition phase. Yeah. And I would get hurt a little bit during the hill phase after 20 weeks of base work. Yeah. I would miss a week and a half, 2 weeks, lose confidence, and decide I need to do 10 more weeks of base. Right. Okay. Silly stuff like that. Yeah. So I did this for a while and then finally forced myself to run a competitive season that wasn't ideal just because I kind of had gotten banged up again in the hill phase and I moved on. Yeah. So that didn't go so great, but it was still good enough that I thought I might have a shot at running 2:22. Yeah. But I kind of knew, as big a fan as I was of Lydiard, that if you looked at the guys he worked with, their performances were still especially when you consider things like grass tracks, cinder tracks, lack of pace setters, championship racing, lack of competition. Those guys were probably still world class or would be world class today at 800 meters, 1,500 meters, even 5,000, 10,000 meters. I mean, he had Dick Taylor run 27:30 from the front at the Commonwealth Games in 71 or 72.
Yeah.
I guess 71. I think Commonwealths are 71. And he had, an Olympic gold medalist in the 5,000 who'd run 13:30 on cinders and very tactical race. But the fastest marathoner he ever coached was 2:16.
Right.
2:17. And I sort of said, this system doesn't seem to work as well for the marathon, despite the fact that it's so much volume.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of searching for another method. And I couldn't find at that time, this is like fall of 2005, I just couldn't find much online.
Yeah.
And I was, at that point, I just finished up grad school. Right. Yeah, I just finished up grad school, and I was just working part-time at a shoe store and part-time as a assistant college track coach.
Yeah.
And basically giving myself a year to try to qualify for the trials or go get a real teaching job.
Yeah.
And I found on a guy who went to the same college I did years before, a guy named Bob Hodge, who had run 2:10:59 himself. He still has a little website, and he just put up a bunch of different things. And one of the things he had on there was some different training schedules for different people. And I was struck by Roger's Rop's schedule, which was the Canova schedule.
Yeah.
And so I just modified it for my paces.
Yeah.
And so I tried to follow just the specific portion. I didn't do the base. I did a Lydiard base, and then tried to follow just the specific portion of that training schedule with the paces adjusted for me. And my assumption was that Rop had cheated, was that he was a doper, because everybody was already saying that Canova had to be a doper, all this stuff. And but I figured he was beating the other dopers, and that I could adjust the schedule based on an ability to recover quick enough or not,
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of came to it. And at the time, I had run a 1:07:30 half marathon. I hadn't run a marathon yet. I had run a 29 flat 6 mile race, so about a 30 flat 10K.
Yeah.
Give or take, probably 30 O's. I think I'd run maybe 24:05, 24:06 for 5 miles. So I was in decent shape, but I was not killing it by any means.
No.
And this Canova cycle just was exactly what I needed at that time. I had a huge aerobic base, but I hadn't done any aerobic quality. This tapped into that. I was not able to follow it very religiously at all.
Right.
In the end, I only completed in like 8-week stretch. I think I completed 2 or 3 of the hard workouts and aborted another 3 or 4 like halfway through, so they might qualify as a moderate workout. And I completed another 5 or 6 what I would call moderate workouts that weren't really hard, but were more work than a regular training run.
Yeah.
And I came out on the other end of it, and I tapered off, and I ran a half marathon in 1:03:44.
Wow.
And so I was nearly 4 minutes faster. Now the course was faster, so it wasn't exactly a straight up comparison, but the course wasn't 4 minutes faster.
No,
and suddenly,
no.
I split a 10K PR. I think I split the second fastest 5 miles I'd ever run in my life, and was at that point still at talking effort,
Wow.
And so then I readjusted my marathon goals, because at that point I was still thinking 2:22, maybe 2:20 if things, I think at that point the workouts had gone well enough that I was kind of thinking 2:20.
Yeah.
But it was sort of difficult to tell. I was training in New England through our winter, and so it is very difficult to know what kind of effort you're putting out when you do a workout, just because of road conditions in terms of ice and all of that and snow, but also in terms of just the amount of clothes that you're wearing. And it just tends to be, but now suddenly I flew south, I run this fast race, and I know okay, I can run a lot faster. And so then I sort of got in my head trying to run 2:16. I ended up running up to 22 miles. I was on about 2:13 pace.
Wow.
And then I ran out of glycogen.
Yeah.
And interestingly, 6 months later, I got to meet Canova and talk to him about it. And as I was describing the breakthrough I had made, and I told him I'd run 103.44 and then I'd run 2:15.28. And he stopped me and he said, "You didn't do my base phase."
Right.
And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "You shouldn't have run 2:15. If you followed my schedule, you wouldn't have run 2:15. You didn't run the base phase, did you? You did something else." And I was like, "Yeah, I did Lydiard." And he was like, "And you weren't able to complete the marathon workouts. You weren't able to do all the workouts in the specific phase." And I was like, "No, I was only able to do about half." He's like, "Yeah, you should have run between 2:13.30 and 2:14 flat." Oh, okay. Well, I was on 2:13 pace until, 22 miles, and I came by. He's like, "Yeah, exactly." So, and that's essentially how I came to do it.
Yeah. And how long are each of the phases then? For the
it varies a lot depending on what schedules you look at and stuff, but generally speaking, your specific phase is about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then your build up to that, usually you have like a 2-week transition phase, and then whatever's left is what you use for your build up. And if you have a lot of time, he splits that into 2 phases, one of which would just be a just running phase.
Right.
So a phase where you maybe do some strides, but mostly you're just doing some volume.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. And then obviously with a taper at the end there.
Yeah, a taper. And to be full disclosure, his schedules have some very light tapers.
Right.
And I always stole my tapers from Pete Pitzinger. And my reasoning for that was just that Pete Pitzinger in his entire career only had one bad marathon.
Right.
And he raced that like a moron. He got sucked out. He was one of the favorites for the 86 Boston Marathon.
Yeah. And
a couple of guys went out really hard. And so Pitzinger, who was never broke 14 minutes for 5K, got sucked out. And it's downhill, but he ran the first 5K there in like 14:20 something. With like a 4 teens mile mixed in.
Yeah.
And then I think he was through 10K in the 29 lows and just blew up.
Yeah. Wow.
But I don't think that was the taper's fault, you know? And other than that, he always ran up to fitness. So part of that, you say, well, mentally, this guy was on task always. Yeah. But I think it also shows that he really knew what he was doing with the taper. So I always stole his taper. I did it the first time because the taper for Canova on the schedule I was looking at didn't actually have it. The schedule had up until Rogers Rop's tune-up race. It was scheduled from one of the years he won Boston.
Yeah.
And his tune-up race was like 2 weeks out, and then it didn't have what he did in the 2 weeks between then and Boston.
Right.
So I had to get a taper from somewhere else. And then in the future, that had worked for me, so I stuck with it. But also, when I did see schedules that Canova had with a taper, I was like, that's not really a taper.
That's just dropping off completely.
So in his case, a lot of them, it's like, I'm looking at the workouts that he's got people doing 6 days out, and I'm going, I'd still be sore.
Yeah.
Come the marathon,
Yeah.
But again, that could also go into one. I mean, a lot of these people, I think, growing up in the third world, I think a lot of the recovery is better. You've just grown up with a lot more. If you grew up on a farm, you grow up a lot stronger. You can take a lot more of a beating. But also, I mean, are they using something? Also possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And does it include a lot of? Obviously, there's a fair amount of mileage in there, but you mentioned it was a bit. For me specifically, I probably dropped down the mileage a bit from what I used to be doing.
I found I had to drop down the mileage. Most people I've coached, we end up dropping the mileage. The position that he takes in the stuff that I've read and in talking to him is essentially that the mileage is secondary.
Yeah.
And that it's getting through the big workouts, specifically in that specific phase when you get to the end. It's much more important to be able to do the workouts than to hit the miles. And the thing is that some of the workouts are easier than really any workout you've ever done. You feel a little weird calling it a workout.
Right.
And it's more of just like an up-tempo day of a run, like a regular run where you get a little excited.
Okay.
But some of the workouts are far more exhausting than anything I've seen elsewhere.
Right.
And it's really important to recover off of those. And when you try to kind of force through, it's a recipe for disaster. Right. And so, and you just don't get the same results back from it.
Yeah.
But if you do let your body recover and listen to your body and say, okay, well, you know what? I worked out hard on Sunday and I was supposed to work out again today and it's Thursday, but you know what? I just don't have that in the tank. Fine.
Okay.
You know, when you do, we'll work out, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Let your body absorb those really hard sessions. But it is the hard sessions, particularly in the specific phase, that are going to get you there.
Yeah.
Now, the nature of this kind of training is that you're not going to be able to do it on super low miles. There are too many long runs. There are too many longer efforts and that sort of thing. So you in order to do it in any fidelity, you do end up doing, 80, 90 miles a week at minimum.
Yeah.
But just generally speaking, you kind of end up cutting back 10%, plus or minus.
Yeah.
Just to be able to handle it.
Yeah. And you mentioned in most weeks, maybe in the specific phase, you do one hard workout and one sort of auxiliary workout. Is that right? One slightly less, or is it more than that?
That was generally what I faded back to. And that's generally what most people I make schedules for. I have them do. Sometimes it might be one hard workout and two lighter auxiliary sessions, or, one more moderate session and some very light sessions. If you look at a lot of the Canova schedules, there might be 2 or 3 really hard workouts in some of these guys. Career comes to mind, who just seemed to, I cannot imagine that guy was clean. He just seemed to be able to go absurdly hard, followed by moderately hard, followed by absurdly hard again, repeatedly for months.
Yeah.
But when I was really, really super fit, I could follow the schedules in full fidelity of some of his lower guys who were just not necessarily lower in terms of performance, but lower in terms of how quickly they recovered and did stuff.
Yeah.
And also too, like life, it's definitely one thing to do it when all you're doing is running, and you can take a 2-hour nap in the middle of the day and sleep 10 hours at night and get a massage when you need it and all that stuff. And it's another thing to do it when you're working and have family.
But one thing I was going to ask you about the Canova thing, do you do a lot of any gym work and stuff with that? Is there anything?
He on his schedules doesn't usually list any, although in stuff that he's written, he references doing it.
Yeah.
Personally, I do. I liked at a basic level doing the John Cook, Dan Paff general strength circuits or something similar. For me, those were the most bang for your buck, complete body work that you could do in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
And that also helped with range of motion, keeping you healthy. As I said, I'm getting a little bit older, and I've never had a lot of speed. And I found myself a couple of years ago, at about age 35, losing what little speed I had, so that suddenly what had once been 10K pace was starting to feel like a sprint.
Yeah.
And because of that, I started working with a girl, Anna Willard. She's remarried now. It's a different last name. But Anna she was ranked number 2 in the world in 2009 at 800 meters.
Wow.
American girl. Her 800 PR is faster than mine. She's run 157.
Wow. I
think we both run 359 for 1500, although maybe she ran 357 once.
Yeah.
That was it. I've run 356, and I think she ran 357.
Okay.
For 1500. But anyway, I go to her and for range of motion and weightlifting stuff, and so because of that, I now personally do some relatively heavy lifting, and some stuff like that. But in terms of Canova, he does have a few guys who are into lifting weights and actually do weights, but most of them it's just body weight exercise.
Okay, that suits
that
me.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, because I don't have access to a gym here. I could, but I can always just. I've been I do a bit of body weight stuff as it is anyway, so it's just easy.
Yeah, and I would say that you could either stick with your body weight stuff, or again, if you were looking to up it a little bit, I could send you the John Cook and Dan Paff. John Cook's the one who made him famous for distance runners. Dan Paff is the guy who invented them. But GS circuits, it's three or four different general strength circuits. They take they're about a little more than 10 minutes of work.
Yeah.
If you go just from exercise to exercise. And the way you would do it is you start one of the circuits, and you do that one circuit for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you switch to the next circuit, you do that one for 4 weeks until you cycle through. So it's 12 or 16 weeks to do the full cycle. So it works well with a training cycle.
Perfect. That'd be great.
With each of the circuits, the first week of doing the circuit, you do 1 by 10 and you try to do it every day.
Right. Okay.
The second week, you try to do 2 by 10 every day. The third week is the tough week. You try to do 2 by 15 every day.
Right.
And then the fourth week is sort of the recovery week, and you try to do 1 by 10 every day.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like I said, I do some heavy lifting now, and I grew up kind of in what I would refer to as the sticks.
Yeah.
And so I kind of grew up a bit of a country bumpkin and working on farms and stuff. So I'm a relatively strong guy for my size.
Yeah.
But I have never felt stronger than when I was doing that stuff.
Okay.
The first time through, it was just, you felt like a freak after 4 weeks. And it's so funny because you don't lift a weight. You don't use any equipment at all. You need something to hold your feet in one of the circuits while you drop. Yeah, but it is highly effective.
Great. That sounds good. Between the base and the specific, what's the base? Obviously, you said the Lydiard base. Obviously, we just covering, getting out and covering mileage maybe more. But is the base? What's the difference between the base and specific with this plan?
Okay, so for you, if you are going to do Canova, you're at 17 weeks out now, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at wanting to be able to do a specific phase starting 8 weeks out. So you've got 8-9 weeks to build up to that. And so the big thing is that during your base, you're going to work on general aerobic fitness. You're going to run, no problem.
Yeah.
And then you're going to try to develop each of your areas of fitness that will get you ready for your specific workouts. So you're going to do what Canova qualifies as a fundamental tempo run. He'll call it a fundamental run, which is essentially just an up pace run at 80 to 90% of your marathon pace. So if we look at your marathon pace for convenience, I'd say it's 3:20 per kilometer.
Yeah.
You'd be looking at running. Do you work better in miles or kilometers?
Kilometers for me, yeah.
Kilometers, awesome. Yeah. So you'd be looking at a tempo run where you were running between as fast as 3:38 a kilometer,
right?
3:40 a kilometer, but could go back as slow as 4:08 to 4:10 a kilometer,
right?
So it's not even really. I mean, I have a feeling that 4:08, 4 minutes a kilometer is probably a fairly normal training pace for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's just doing some longer runs, making a point of holding steady at that range.
Right.
And on the faster end, it does end up being a little bit quicker than, say, you would normally run for 30 kilometers.
Yeah.
But that submaximal aerobic work, which correlates to aerobic threshold, which is sort of a controversial term because some of the physiologists say it doesn't exist and some do, but aerobic threshold training. And that builds up to doing your long, extensive specific work, which is your volume work that is close to marathon volume. And Canova generally does that in terms of time. So in your case, you'd be looking to try to complete during your specific phase a long run where you're going to run for 2 hours and 10 to 2 hours and 20 minutes at about 90 to 95% of your marathon pace. So now you're trying to work down towards almost 3:30 a kilometer in a training run.
Right.
And that is in many ways the most challenging workout that you would see in your specific phase from Canova. So to see the difference between base phase for that, you're looking at running between 20 kilometers and maybe as long as 35 kilometers, but at a pace of, say, 3:40 to 4 minutes per kilometer.
Yeah.
And then in the specific phase, running 35 to 45 kilometers, 35 to 40 kilometers really. Very, very few people would go beyond 40 kilometers. But and you would be doing that at more like 3:30 to 3:40 a kilometer.
Okay. And
then the other specific work, intensive specific work, which is referring to on speed specific. So if we're again saying 3:20 a kilometer is marathon pace, in the base phase, you would do reps maybe as short as a kilometer. So you might do something like 20 by 1K at 3:20 a kilometer, or 2K, 10 by 2K, taking half the distance at a steady pace, say 4 minutes a kilometer, recovery.
Right.
And then the other thing that you might do that would be specific pace would be an alternation session where you try to average marathon pace for 20 kilometers by running a little faster and then a little slower.
Right.
But in the base phase, that would look like you wouldn't average quite as fast. So you might do 20 kilometers where you're running 1 kilometer at marathon pace and 1 kilometer at 3:40.
Okay.
And then towards the end of the base phase, you're running 1 kilometer at 3:10, but you're still running the recovery kilometer at 3:40.
Right.
And then in the specific phase, you would try to do it where you average 3:10 and 3:30.
Right. Makes sense.
And then for the rep one, as you go into the specific phase, the reps get longer. And so you might try to build up to something like 5 by 5K at marathon pace. But the part that would make it really hard is that you do it with 1 kilometer recoveries at, say, only backing it off to like 3:40, maybe 3:45 a kilometer for that recovery.
Right.
So it's just barely taking the edge off.
Okay.
It's almost more of a mental reset than a physical one.
Yeah.
But that enables you to go longer than if you, say, tried to do 26 kilometer or 25 kilometer steady state at marathon pace.
Yeah.
You're still getting in the 25 kilometers at marathon pace, but you're adding in these other kilometers, another 4 kilometers of recovery in there. So now you're going 29, 30 kilometers instead, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Then the other big thing with the Canova base phase is he does want you to do some, everybody will have you do some LT work. So you'll do some threshold work, which will largely be faded out. You'll maybe do 1 maintenance threshold work bit in your specific phase.
Yeah.
But during the base, you would try to get in some LT work and then lastly, some speed work.
Okay.
And he's a real big believer in doing some speed in the base phase before you do your marathon training.
Okay.
And how you approach that depends on what type of athlete you are, and some of it's mentally what you like to do better and that sort of thing, but some form of speed. And it doesn't, because it's not specific to your event.
Yeah.
If you got a favorite type of speed work that you really love, that's the right one to do. If you're a fartlek person, fartlek's the way to go. If you're a track workout person and you just love your 5K workouts, that's the way to go. If you just love your ladders, that's awesome. If you're a 10K person, you just love churning out 20 by 400 or 12 by 800, then great. That's the way to go.
Okay.
Because it's just about basically processing lactic acid as fuel.
Right.
And getting muscularly stronger so that the pace feels a little bit easier. But it's not specific to the event. Okay. So the exact specifics of it are relatively unimportant.
Okay. Sounds good.
And then that, again, will largely fade out during the specific phase unless you're in a situation where you're trying to win a marathon. Right. In which case, he does a lot of the speed at the end of some of these workouts. And you'll probably still do one workout like that because it really does help with the efficiency thing. But I do know, like, a lot of the Brazilians who've run really, really well in the marathon, Marilson Gomes dos Santos, De Lima, Ronaldo da Costa, they do a lot of that where I know Dos Santos' big workout was you do a 16-mile run at about 80-85% of marathon pace. Just a good, steady, long run pace. Yeah. Really kind of getting after it. Yeah. 5K at marathon pace. So now you're 19 and a half miles in, 19 miles in, and you're good and tired. And then he finishes with 6 by 400 at 5K pace with only 100 jog rest. So that for that 3K, you end up almost averaging close to marathon pace. Yeah. Plus you're dropping this speed. Yeah. So it is effective in that way. Yeah. It helps teach your body to be a little stingier with glycogen earlier because you might need more of it later. Okay. Or at least that's my understanding of how it works. Yeah. Sounds logical. I don't think that's the super scientific answer. It sounds good. The only thing in the end that really comes down as sort of, to me, as being, super key to doing the Canova marathon training is 2 parts. Yeah. The first is that you use the fundamental tempo range. So these just moderately quicker runs. Yeah. In the base and then as maintenance work into the specific phase. Okay. that along with, and I guess I would tie that into, and that you're doing some form of alternation work, which is just saying that you're doing some work where you're doing recoveries at a much quicker pace than traditional workouts would have you doing recoveries.
Okay.
And then the really big one is the marathon specific workouts. You just do more work at marathon pace than in almost any other cycle that you're seeing. You're going to be trying to get in close to 20 miles each of the 6 weeks that you're in specific work at marathon pace, or that is in some way marathon specific. So that might be as slow as 95% of marathon pace, or it might be a situation where you're just averaging marathon pace during a workout, but you're never actually running it.
Okay.
But essentially, it's just a lot more specific work at that pace, and that repetition of it in large volume is what teaches the body, oh, I can do this while burning a lot more fat than I thought.
Sounds good. I'm excited, actually. I'm really keen to go and give it a crack. It sounds bloody tough, but I'll be excited.
Yeah, and that's the thing, it's really important to kind of just be honest with yourself about it. The biggest thing is staying healthy.
Okay.
I told you about the breakthrough I had with it, and I was barely, I honestly felt like I wasn't following the program. Right. You know?
Yeah.
As I was going through it, I just felt like I had one great workout early on, and I got all excited. And then all of a sudden it was like, holy crap, I'm tapering in 2 weeks and I've barely done anything, you know? And it was the biggest, I ran faster after I got into better shape later, but in terms of a single breakthrough, it was the only one like that I ever had in my life, where I went from, being on one very distinct level to being, an entirely a different place.
Yeah, yeah.
So the really big thing is to make sure you're recovering from them. The nature of the beast is you're going to end up getting to do, which is the fun experience part, you're going to get to do some really crazy hard workouts that are just kind of wacky, and you go, oh my God. But whether you do, it's sort of like the Yoda thing. You just need to do them. He doesn't need to see every day. Yeah. You just need to have had the experience, and it goes a long way. Okay.
Great. Can't wait.
Should be fun.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time again today. It's been brilliant.
Oh, no problem. It's been fantastic.
Great. We'll catch up soon.
All right. Sounds good. Have a great day.
You too.